Circus.
Welcome back. Tonight we're under the big top, and I mean that loosely because what happened at this particular circus doesn't fit neatly under any label I know. 3 accounts, all different, all in their own way difficult to sit with. I've been thinking about them for days. There's something about mirrors that people already don't quite trust. This story found a way to make that worse. Here's what they told me. The reflection behind me was smiling, but my face was not. I had wandered into the mirror tent near the back of the fairground, one of those traveling circus setups that parks itself on a municipal lot for a weekend and vanishes by Monday. It was maybe 9:40 p.m. The main crowd had drifted toward the big top, pulled by the sound of a brass band and the smell of something frying. I was alone in there, or I thought I was. The tent smelled of canvas and something underneath that, something faintly chemical, like the inside of an old carnival ride that never fully dries out, a smell that sits at the back of your throat and doesn't leave. The light inside was amber and uneven, coming from a string of bare bulbs looped along the tent's peak, several of them flickering at a frequency just slow enough to seem almost natural. The mirrors were tall, maybe 8 feet, framed in painted wood that had been red once but had faded to the color of dried clay. The paint was chipped at the corners, worn smooth in the middle where thousands of hands had probably steadied themselves against the glass. I was walking the narrow corridor between them, watching my reflections multiply and shrink down the tunnel, each image slightly darker than the last, until the furthest ones were barely more than silhouettes. That was when I noticed the smile. My reflection, 2 panels to the left, was showing teeth. I was not showing teeth. I turned to face it directly and it matched me instantly. Neutral expression. Hands at my sides, perfectly cooperative. I told myself the angle had distorted something. Curved glass does strange things. I kept walking. The wooden floor shifted under my feet and one of the mirror panels swung slightly on its hinge. In the movement, just for a second, I caught a reflection of a reflection, and in that doubled image, the version of me that was furthest back had its head tilted at roughly 45 degrees. None of the others did. I stopped walking and stood very still. The tent was quiet except for the low hum of the generator outside and the distant brass band, muffled now as if the canvas walls had thickened around me. The tilted reflection slowly straightened. Not fast. Slowly, the way a person does when they realize they've been caught. I felt something cold move through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. I turned around and walked back the way I'd come, keeping my eyes forward, not looking at the glass. I was aware of the mirrors on either side of me the way you're aware of a drop you're not looking at. I could feel my own heartbeat in my throat, and the sound of my shoes on the wooden floor seemed too loud. The exit was a canvas flap, and I hit it with both hands and stepped out into the lot. The air outside was cold and smelled like popcorn oil and generator exhaust, and I stood there breathing it in for a long moment, letting the noise of the fairground settle back over me like something ordinary and safe. I went back to find my friends, and I didn't say anything because I couldn't explain it in a way that didn't sound ridiculous. I laughed at something someone said. I ate the rest of someone's churro. I performed being fine, and it almost worked. But that night, back at the motel, I opened my phone's health app because I do that sometimes when I can't sleep. It's a nothing habit, meaningless. I looked up the step count for the evening. The app showed 1,247 steps logged between 9:40 and 9:52 p.m. 12 minutes. The tent's interior was maybe 40 feet end to end. 1,247 steps would cover something closer to half a mile. The data didn't show a gap where I'd been. It showed me going somewhere. The path it traced led outside the tent's footprint entirely, northeast, toward the empty lot, the unlit part where there was nothing. I don't remember leaving the tent before I left the tent. I don't know what 247 steps means. I don't know whose route that was. Something taking your belongings is frightening enough. But what I want to tell you about next is something that left nothing behind at all, except a question I still can't answer. The tiny car stopped dead center in the ring, and 13 clowns climbed out, but the program said 12. I counted twice. 13. The 14th stayed in the car. I could see a white-gloved hand resting on the door frame, completely still, while the others tumbled and honked and sprayed water into the front row. The smell hit me when I leaned forward to count again. Motor oil and damp canvas, something underneath the grease paint that was warmer and stranger than it should have been. Nobody else seemed to count. Nobody else looked at the car. I looked at the program again. The illustration showed 12 figures, all identical in their red and white costumes, arranged in a half circle. I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket, the zipper open, as it always is, and told myself I'd miscounted. That lasted about 40 seconds. The car door swung open 3 inches. The gloved hand disappeared inside. The door stayed exactly 3 inches open for the remainder of the act, and no light from the ring reached into it, which was not possible given where the car was sitting under the main spot. The seat beneath me had gone sticky with the heat of the crowd packed under the canvas, and I became very aware of the hard edge of the chair pressing into the back of my thighs, the physical fact of being surrounded, enclosed. When the 12 clowns finished and took their bow, they walked single file toward the performer's entrance on the left side of the ring. The car sat empty with the door still open. I watched the ringmaster step over the door frame without looking down, which meant he knew exactly where it was. That was the first thing that felt like a decision rather than an accident. I left my seat at intermission, not for the bathroom. I walked the concourse once and found the exit facing the parking lot and checked that it was unlocked. It was. I went back to my seat because I had left my jacket on the chair and my car keys were in the pocket with the program. By the time I sat back down, the lights had already dropped for the second half. My jacket was on the chair. The program was not in the pocket. I checked both pockets. I checked the floor. The zipper was done up. I never zipped that pocket. A woman 2 seats to my right leaned over and asked if I dropped something, and I said I was looking for a piece of paper, and she nodded and turned back to the ring too quickly, with a quality to the nod that felt less like indifference and more like recognition. The second half opened with the ringmaster introducing the clown act again. 12 clowns emerged from the performer's entrance, crossed the ring, and climbed into the car. He said they would now demonstrate their famous capacity trick. The audience counted aloud as they climbed back out. 1, 2, 3. I stopped at 12 and watched the car. 13. The audience applauded. On my phone, I pulled up a photograph I had taken during the first act. I had not planned to take it. I sometimes photograph things without registering that I am doing it, a habit from years of travel. But looking at it now, I do not remember composing this shot. The ring perfectly framed, the car centered, all of it deliberate in a way my hands alone could not have managed. The photos showed the ring, the car, 11 clowns mid-tumble. Around me, I heard the audience's collective breathing drop to almost nothing as the next act began, that strange suspension of 300 people holding still. I zoomed in on the car. The door was closed in the photograph. The 14th clown was standing 12 feet behind the car, not moving, facing directly into my section. The image blurred at the edges from the spotlight wash, but the center was sharp enough. The figure was not wearing the red and white costume. I left then. I took my jacket and walked up the aisle and out the exit I had checked. In the parking lot, I found my car and sat in it before I noticed the program on the passenger seat. I had not brought a second copy. Someone had drawn a small red circle around the figure on the far right. Under the circle, in very small letters, "We saw you counting." I sat very still. The tent glowed behind me. I have not been back. That next story involved a gap in time. This one involved someone who very much did not want to be seen. Something inside the cannon was shifting its weight, and the site had been empty since 11. I had come back for my lens cap. That is all. I had left it near the prop table after the evening show. I had a key to the side gate because I was contracted to document the rigging teardown scheduled for the following morning. I let myself in, crossed the midway, and walked into the main tent. The tent still smelled of burnt powder and trampled grass, that particular mix of sawdust and canvas gone heavy with night air. I could hear the fabric above me ticking in the wind off the fairground, slow and irregular, like something settling. And there in the dark at the center of the tent floor was the cannon, sitting alone. And something inside it was moving, a slow, rhythmic shift of weight, the barrel tilting 1 or 2 degrees left, then settling, then tilting again. I stopped walking. The cannon is roughly 4 feet in diameter at the mouth and about 12 feet long. Whatever was inside it filled enough of that space to change the balance point of the whole unit. I just stood there and watched it move. I backed up toward the tent entrance and my heel caught a cable stake. I went down hard on my right side, and when I pushed myself up, I was oriented differently, facing the rigging instead of the exit. That cost me 4 or 5 seconds. By the time I turned back, the movement inside the barrel had stopped. Complete stillness. I walked toward the side exit at the north end of the tent, not running, because I did not want to make noise. There is a narrow gap between the equipment cages and the bleacher scaffolding, and you have to turn sideways to pass through it. The cold coming off the metal cages was immediate. That specific deep storage cold that has nothing to do with the air temperature around it. I was halfway through the gap when both my arms were grabbed from behind, pinned to my sides. The grip was at elbow height, one hand on each arm, fingers meeting in the middle of my forearms. I could not move my upper body at all. I tried to pull forward, and the hold tightened. The fingers were cold through the jacket, not body warm, the kind of cold that had been somewhere dark for a long time. I did not shout. I do not know why. I just stood there for what I think was about 8 seconds, and then the grip released all at once, and I pushed through the gap and walked fast to the gate without looking back. I told myself it was a rigging worker who had been sheltering in the equipment area and panicked when I stumbled past. I told myself that on the drive home. I told myself that for 2 days. On the 3rd day, I went back for the teardown shoot as contracted. The site foreman told me the cannon had been decommissioned 6 weeks prior because the compression mechanism had failed. The mouth had been welded shut. He said this while pointing at it. The weld bead ran clean around the entire rim, unbroken, with surface oxidation that looked like it had been there for weeks. Which means whatever I had watched, redistributing its weight inside a sealed barrel, had done so without any mechanism I can account for, and I cannot stop thinking about that specific detail. I did not say anything about what I had seen. I just asked him who else had access to the tent on the night I came back for the lens cap. He checked the log. The gate key I had been given was the only one signed out that night. No secondary log entry, no worker, no record of anyone else on the property between the 10:45 p.m. show close and my own entry at 11:22. I have looked at my forearms twice since I got home. Pressure bruises on both arms, symmetrical, 4 fingers wide. They are still deepening. 3 stories, I'll be honest. The last one I'm still not entirely sure I believe, though I'm not sure that makes it better. Thank you for spending the evening here. Stay safe out there. I'll see you next time.